I think that, and again, these are just predictions, but certainly, if you go out 10 years, 20 years from now, I think there's going to be no distinction between monitors that are 16:9 aspect ratio, whether they be consuming mostly video content or actually where you do email on them as well. I think the things that hang on your living room wall are going to be monitors, and they're going to show video a lot of the time, and they're going to show some other stuff some of the time. And the thing that you open up on your lap is also going to be a 16:9 aspect ratio monitor. And so I think that in today's world, people are already starting to do that. And Chad mentioned that, which is, there's a lot of devices that sort of use your living room thing on the wall as a monitor, and so I think that's going to happen regardless. And then you marry that with the fact that you're going to have these relatively small 16:9 aspect ratio screens in your pocket, which are going to be the most voluminous devices on the planet. They already are in terms of what relative to TV sets. And you're always a lot closer to a mobile device than you're closer to a monitor. And so I don't know what that means in terms of minutes consuming content, but I know it's going to be a lot. So I think those are going to, it's going to be, just monitors. There's going to be no sort of talk 10 years from now about, is it TV sets, is it living room, is it this, is it this? It's just going to be how you interact with content.
Well, that's already happening with the iPhone. Is the iPhone a computer or is it a phone?
Mm-hmm.
So the blurring of the lines are already starting to happen, and I think it's only going to accelerate, like what Jason mentioned.
And those lines will just keep going into the TV. So the TV is going to have more and more internet functionality. You'll start to see TVs with web browsers built into them, and that'll be the web channel, and then you'll go to any of our sites or a million other video sites also right from the TV.
It's been a difficult thing, though. I mean, we just got, I don't know how many were at CES, but it's the annual slog in Las Vegas, the Consumer Electronics Show. And one of the things they were showing was a Yahoo connected TV effort, and it's about the 20th I've seen the idea of it. It's a very good. They did a nice job. It's very widget based, which people are familiar with, but it's been very difficult to marry the two because they seem to be separate. Do you have to differentiate, or is the whole thing just a web television, essentially?
Well, web TV is a bad rap because, it was a failed enterprise 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, web TV was about your grandmother's email and trying to read the New York Times on a 4:3 screen, at standard def resolution. Mm-hmm. And it was a yucky experience. And now it's broadband, and now it's about video instead of text, and you're getting a Wiimote type interfaces like on the PS3, and on these you've got web browsers.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the things we talked about, I had a panel called 2025 at CES where we had a lot of very heavy tech people talk about a wide range of things. Some of them were, you're going to know because of massive computing that it's going to rain at 3:27 p.m. in this part of the city. So like that kind of sensing devices and stuff like that, which seemed magical to me. But one of the things they were talking about is this idea of the television being touch-oriented and movement-oriented, very much like, I don't know how many you have Wii players, but anyone who has any child has one, if they can afford it. But it's the idea that you get in front of the television and it recognizes you, and it knows what you like on YouTube or wherever, and the way you move with it, you wear these, HP has these rings that you put on, and they recognize your rings, and then they give you what you're interested in.
Well, there's a couple of generations of it. So the first round is you control motion sensing, like a Wii and a trackball and the remote, various things. And remember, when the mouse came in to the computer in 1984 with the Macintosh, that was a revolution, to have a mouse. But it took then another 20 years for it to become ubiquitous and to get rid of left, right, up, down. And on the TV, we're still in left, right, up, down, and it's going to be a long time, 10 or 20 years, getting just a pointer on the TV like it took on the computer. And then you've got the sensing where they sense you. Okay, now there's the version of it like you wear 3D glasses, or you've got the ring that's got all your ID.
Pretty.
That's probably a niche-y kind of market. But then there's the part of the market, like on the Wii, you've got an IR sensor there, and you can be doing things like gesturing and controlling your TV by moving like this, and channels and spinning.
This was the channel.
All of that's yet to be really invented and productized. But and then yes, it will recognize you through retinal scan, through other stuff, biometric data, and then all the personalization of trying to help you find things that you like will be there. So think of it as parallel tracks. There's the hardware CE companies that are developing the physics of these devices and control, and there's all of our content companies bringing basically the internet to television, and all screens will be IP connected and then have this access. And then there'll be a bunch of different control paradigms.
And when you're talking about the mobile devices, do you see it being more like this very hard iPhone or Kindle kind of like experience, or we were showing some stuff at our conference last year, the very flexible stuff. I don't know if you ever saw Harry Potter and they're all reading the newspapers. That's certainly possible. The idea that you would see pictures that move, like the plane crash and the successful plane crash finally in New York. You would see it as it's happening, and the news would update itself on the New York Times front page would change every 5 minutes or whatever. Do you see that being an ability to deliver video that way? You can see them being able to deliver pictures and text a little bit quicker than that, but you would have almost a roll-up device. A flexible or thing that you would just throw away. Yeah,
you just have to remember that from the time you can imagine it to the time it's in mainstream people's hands is 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's a frustrating long time. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of the computing stuff that we're doing now was envisioned in 1968. Mm-hmm. And there was a famous big demo of mouse computing and all these things. But, it just takes a long time for the technology, for the cost to come down and for it to mainstream. But, it's happening faster and faster.
Let's talk a little bit about social networks, and then I want to sort of get your sort of very future predictions of how it impacts your own businesses. Social commuting obviously has been the big hype and also important growth area of the internet recently. The idea of as Hulu's doing, you're all doing this idea of the social connections people make. Obviously, Facebook and MySpace have been the most successful, and there's a whole lot of video usage on those sites now, and sharing and discovering, and especially discovering, especially indie films, for example, which it's very hard to get the word out. This idea of making all these various, and he told two friends and so on, the kind of the Brecht commercial ideal of business. How do you look at these social networks now? I mean, they're somewhat crude at this moment, even though people use them ubiquitously. How do you see them develop?
Well,
Chat first.
Just in terms of social functionality on YouTube, we look at it as the social functionality as a great discovery feature. I mean, we're not necessarily looking at it as a business, but we deal with so much content. Some of the best signals that you receive are the emails or the emails that have video links that your friends send to you. Mm-hmm. So ways to capture that data, ways to capture what you rate or comment or mark as a favorite on our site, feeding that to your network of friends as it's just another signal that we can use. I mean, there's many signals that we try to look at, and search can only take you so far. So that's what we're looking at in terms of it within the social world. How people can build those connections and share the discovery experience.
It can't just be a viral experience. You've had several successes in the viral market where videos, everyone just has to suddenly look at them. The Mentos commercial was one, not on YouTube, but there were lots of them. There's been lots of these kind of things, but that seems to be sort of a catch-as-catch-can solution.
I guess some of the things that we're looking at now are, we've always built tools or features for the uploader to help them manage their content or build an audience, gain subscribers. But that's a small percentage of actually our community that actually participates in that way, that actually uploads a piece of content. There's many more people on our site that just consume the videos. And we're going to look at ways that we can engage those users and maybe reward them for just their viewing activity. So if you find the Diet Coke Mentos video when it only has a few thousand views and you share that or mark that as a favorite, how do you get credit for that? How do you get recognized for that? And there are people that may consistently do that. That we think this is a big opportunity for us, is to just give them visibility, and hopefully people, just like as you would follow, a Fred or any user on our site that may upload video content that you're interested in, you can follow them. You can follow someone that just discovers great content. So that's how we're going to look at
just discovers versus, say, the hug guy.
Yeah,
do you guys know about the hug guy? He hugs people. It's actually quite moving, I have to say. I'm not a hugger. So, Reed.
Go
ahead.
So for social stuff, very much like what Chad said, which is our view at Hulu is that social features are an incredible tool. We're not defined. I think there's a couple of companies that are very good out there whose whole mission is to be a social network or a social utility, and that is not what we are aspiring to be. We certainly see critical importance to the community and social features, because we absolutely are humble about the fact that we will never be as good as the world at surfacing the most interesting content for a given individual. And so we create a lot of tools to do that. And so that's why we invest so much in the technology to make sure that Crawford, this documentary that we had on our service, and we're very fortunate to have, got surfaced to just the right people, so that anecdotally, I think if you take a look at how many people watched it in the first weekend on Hulu, it would have compared to a top 10 documentary in theaters of all time. And so it's those social features that help sort of elevate and raise and help creators connect with the audience. So I think it's very important and critical to our business, but I don't want to misset the expectation. We're not a social utility or a social network.
What about for you?
Very similar, I think, to Hulu. Trying to figure out how do we integrate with Facebook, how do we make that work, and for the discovering of film.
And let's talk about going forward, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. The idea, what would be your perfect ideal of, if you could imagine your business in 10 years, how would it be delivered? What would you, because right now it really is kind of a blump, kind of a slow, you fire up the computer, you go to hulu.com, for example, or Netflix, you look at it, you turn it off. It feels like a lot of steps kind of thing. How do you look at, do you have like a device you'd like to see, a way people are consuming this, or a giant screen in your house that talks to you? What, come in and they go, "Hello, Jason. You're looking peaked today." How do you, I know you're going to like this kind of thing. How do you? It's a little, could also be a little frightening, the whole idea of the Skynet kind of becoming self-aware.
It's a delicate line that you have to walk. Obviously, there's less friction in the world that you describe, which is you just walk into a room and suddenly your favorite content comes up and it rifles through and it's continuous play and all those kind of things. That is in some ways very enjoyable, but in some ways very nerve-wracking in terms of intrusion on your ability to control your media experience. And so you're absolutely right, Kara, that we do things that we're religious about, not having autoplay, not being very careful about continuous play. We don't do that on the service, and because we think that it's better to err on the side of a user being in control 100% of the time, so that they can make the decisions. And I think you see that on YouTube and Netflix as well, and done in a very, very strong way. And I think people respond well to that. The word of mouth is very strong about. Think about the history of media. It has been a world where you're not in control. It hasn't been personalized, but it's coupled with you're also not in control.
In that there's some programmer in Burbank that's just telling you when.
This is what you should watch on Thursday at 8 o'clock, which is silly and quaint. And so I think that what we want to do, and I definitely don't want to speak for Chad or Reed, but with respect to Hulu, is to put people, the user, in control of their experience. Give them everything the world has to offer. Make it palatable and digestible through great tools and technology, but never step over the line of anything beyond what we should be doing in terms of letting.
Not being creepy is one of your business mantras?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be proud of what you do, and you only live once, and so we want to create a service that we're so proud of to tell our kids, hey, we played a part in this, and hopefully we're moving the ball forward in a strong way. But so that's why if we're going to err on one side, it's going to be on the, it's okay if it's a little bit clunky, so long as the user is in control.
I'd say we're similar, but we're fascinated, for example, in Facebook at how much they've pushed the privacy edge, and kind of opened our minds, about sharing. And so,
can you define that push the? What do you mean by that?
The feed of what everyone's up to, 4 years ago was very controversial,
right?
And now everyone lives on it, And
except they did try that with advertising and got slapped down rather hard.
Yeah, but you don't get innovation unless you push the edge. So, where we would be is, very similar, but we would be, we'll make mistakes. Every year we'll do something that's a little too aggressive and then have to back up. And
what did you do this year?
Early on, we tried to really push this, the Netflix community, sort of, this was 3 years ago, Facebook within Netflix and between Netflix members. And, it just didn't get to critical mass. And, you could see each other's cues and ratings and stuff. And, it just didn't take off. It's because people want the social stream to be their music taste, their movie taste. We're one little part of it. And so at times, we failed to recognize our role, or the role of movies in people's lives, more importantly.
But do you see, do you see the consumer sort of willing to embrace that non-private? I mean, some of the stuff I see on Facebook is
I mean, it's very
disturbing, to say the
generational,
least.
you know, and so you get a skew that way. But yeah, I think you said, you know, where's it going in 10 years? I think it'll be a lot more open. Our preconceptions about as a society will be, you know, there'll be a lot more sharing of things than there is today.
More? Oh, good God.
And no, significantly more. Yeah, no, that's and you know, what does the Nirvana look like? Yeah, you can get anything you want. And you know, right now, I don't know, for most of you, 2 out of 3 movies that you see are kind of and 1 out of 3 is like, wow. And if we can just collectively shift it to 2 out of 3 movies you see are wow for you, then you'll watch a lot more. You know, sports is going to go to the side, and everyone's going to be watching entertainment video. So doubling total film viewing, that would be my Nirvana.
Okay. Until you get into sports stuff.
Not likely.
Yeah.
So 10 years, the Nirvana. Let's see. You know, who knows what's really going to happen within the next 10 years. I think for us, the last 4 years have kind of flown by, and we've seen the service develop, and just people's appetite for video online has increased so much that, you know, the next 10 years, you know, I think we're in for a treat, I guess. I just think that...
Well, what treat?
A treat where you can get any video that you want at any time on any device. I think that really just what we've been talking about, scarcity of content creation, scarcity of distribution, these things are going to continue to break down where everyone has the ability to create their own content and distribute it to whoever they want.
Using easier tools.
Easier tools.
They're relatively easy now, considering what you used to have. All right, let's talk a little bit of copyright and the idea of ownership of content. And it's always been a sort of stick in the mud situation in terms of, and actually we'll talk about the link to that, the monetization, who gets paid for that, continues to be a controversy. Jason, you have a service that has all premium content on it that is owned by your partners. You're getting more from other partners that aren't NBC and Universal, and you're surfacing a lot of old content. How do you look at the copyright situation right now in terms of it changing? Because there still is tension between Hollywood and most especially Google, really, but other internet companies about, you know, with the music companies, they're going to fight until they're all dead. I think that's pretty much how that's going to end. How do you look at how that changes? When does it break? There's been more content, and yet it's still not all the content, and it's still constantly being negotiated. There's obviously still fights in the entertainment industry between writers and studios and distributors and stuff.
Well, a couple things. Chad deserves a lot of credit in his company because they've done a lot in the past 2 years specifically. So, you know, when you mentioned sort of the issues and the tensions, it's more with Pirate Bay and the BitTorrent clients, which, by the way, is separate from BitTorrent, the company. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but the BitTorrent directories, that's really where there's a lot of concern because, you know, you can go and get every episode of The Simpsons ever without commercials.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was at the Peter Cherney. He said, well, piracy is a really good business model.
Yeah.
You know, costs nothing. And
it's
you get
fantastic.
everything.
The cost of goods are very low.
Yeah.
So, and so that's the real concern, candidly. And I think that all of us up here are trying to get to a world where you can achieve this nirvana that we've all been talking about and do so in a way that respects the content creator and the distributor and the producer, et cetera. And to your second question about, well, how does this sort of work with the actors and the writers?
How do the business models change? Where do you imagine?
Yeah, so you know, I'm an observer of all the things that go on with regards to the guilds and things like that. Because keep in mind that the discussions about writers and actors and directors is between that community and the producers, and Hulu is a distributor. And so, but when I look at it, I think the best way to approach that environment in an environment that changes so quickly, and you're talking about businesses that, you know, while they get a lot of press and attention, as I think they should because they're very culturally relevant and signals of where the world goes, they are modest relative to the $70 to $80 billion U.S. advertising industry as it relates to premium content. So, once you recognize that, I think the best model to go is to, you know, be open and transparent in terms of producers, directors, actors, writers, and then make sure there's a good percentage. Because with percentages in terms of how you operate, and this is, I'm talking about participation and things like that, then as this grows, the participants and the content owners get paid with that growth. I think there's historically been a lot of sort of assumptions and talk about, well, where is it really, and this, that, and the other, and fixed payments and things like that. And this is just me talking. I am absolutely only talking on behalf of Jason Kyler, but I believe that the best way to think about it in terms of how does the business model work in terms of the creative community is to make sure that there's a fair percentage and to allow
There's
that
been a lot
to
of
grow.
sort of, they've been burned a lot. There's been a lot of, it doesn't come through them. A lot of these services have died, that have been promising, going along those edges. Where's the problem from your perspective? When does that change?
Well, I think with regards to what we're doing, the three of us up here, we're in a business, as I said, that the most important thing is the consumer behavior is heading in this direction. That's the hardest thing to actually ever create, is a service that people actually care about. And so there have been a lot of previous services that Reed knows probably more about than anybody in this room that got out the gate and just didn't work. And and there was a lot of sort of focus on them from a participation standpoint. Whereas the services that our companies are creating, they're starting to work. And that's, but I don't want to, misstate it. It's early, but they're starting to work. And in that situation where the future is uncertain, you don't know where this goes, I think the ideal is to focus on modest term agreements and to do so on a transparent percentage basis, because nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
Any question?
No, I'm just curious. How does the copyright issue shake out, and where do people get paid? Because I think that's one of the big issues.
Sure.
I mean, do you see you striking deals with independent companies and paying for their filmmaking and getting them up on your service ever?
Well, we pay, mostly we deal with studios because
Right.
even small studios, because then the studio will put it on Netflix and on Hulu and on YouTube and on DVD, put it in Walmart, and it's multi-channel. We're one channel, so it doesn't make that much sense for us to be buying film rights. It makes
Well, if you
sense
want
for
an
someone to
exclusive
do it. Sure, but it's not much of an exclusive world, right? I think for all of us, it's getting the content in lots of places, making it really convenient. The world of exclusives is the world of channels and proprietary, and we're all running fast the other way, which is how to create the best experience, in this on-demand choose anything. But I'd agree with Jason that the big threat is the BitTorrent-based piracy, Pirate Bay, Mininova. There's a real and growing issue there. It has absolutely wrecked the market for entertainment in South Korea, where they have big broadband. Okay, you just can't. The DVD people are pulling out of the market. You can't sell anything. Nobody buys content, and then they've trained a generation of people that you don't pay for content. And the studios have contributed a little bit to it by using the delayed windows. And so if you want to get something and you can't get it. So one of the best antidotes to piracy is, pushing forward on the content availability on YouTube, on Hulu, on Netflix, provide a legitimate alternative. But the other is, I don't know why, we as a society are tolerating, all of this piracy.
Does that change if they give easy services, that people will suddenly start, or is this sort of a generation that just takes? I mean, their argument is, I'm from the West Side Story argument, I'm depraved because I was deprived.
It's hard to compete with free,
Right.
that argument. Well, I think it's a combination of things. You want to stigmatize the piracy, you want to crack down in places, but you also have to provide the reasonable alternatives.
What about you?
Well, I agree with what these guys have been saying. First of all, the windowing, this way that they roll out content, it's somewhat confusing. I mean, if you give the people the content when they want it, that will somewhat reduce piracy. I mean, I think iTunes has proven that there's a model that people will pay for music. Through our services, through ad-supported services, I think there's a big opportunity, or subscription-based service, to provide content to people. And they know it's going to be there on a consistent basis. Your Gossip Girls are going to be there.
Would you do a subscription-based? Do you see YouTube getting into that?
We're looking at all the options that would provide any kind of value for our users. And the users that are participating in terms of trying to earn revenue on our site. Right now, the first step for us is advertising, and that's always been a natural for us because Google's an advertising company.
Really? I hadn't heard.
Yeah, you haven't heard that?
No.
You didn't see the news?
Google is Skynet, you know that.
Really?
Yeah. It's going to become self-aware in 2012 and start destroying the human race. I'm teasing. Not really. Let's talk, lastly, before we get to audience questions, where do you consume most of your video now? Right now, television, where? Movies, where do you go? Where do you actually? Where have your habits changed, if at all?
Well, it's hard when you're working on a video product not to
Not to use
watch your own product off. all day long. It's hard to get
Do you
work
go to
done.
movies? Do you go out to movies?
Every once in a while. There's more for the kids.
Right, exactly. So you had to unfortunately see some. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I see. Someone's like, "Oh, that movie was so great." I'm like, "I just saw Bolt. It was really great in 3D." It was fine, but honestly, if it's the only movie you see, it's not so terrific. Go ahead.
More and more streaming, less and less on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
A lot on the laptop, some on the big screen.
Does it connect to your television? Do you connect
yeah.
it to your television?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit unusual in that I watch almost all of the video content when I'm in the home on my computer, and some like Carolina basketball games, things like that. I actually go and meet up with friends to watch that in a bar or whatnot, and then watch a lot of movies. So
Watch movies in movie theaters.
In movie theaters. Slumdog Millionaire I saw a couple weeks ago with my wife, and that's real value. Mm-hmm. And you asked about business models. I think that for a lot of people here, it's I think it's encouraging to know that the theatrical model is a wonderful model. I think the sequence will probably change for given the title going forward. So the traditional model is go to theaters first, then go to DVD, and then streaming, ad-supported, et cetera, for theatrical content. I wouldn't be surprised for certain movies that, given there's only finite shelf space in terms of theatrical houses out there in the world, that they actually go online first to generate some buzz and publicity, et cetera, and then maybe earn their way to have a big DVD release. Crawford's a good example. It's going to be on DVD, I think, very soon. And its first window was online, ad-supported, to generate, to pop above because it's so hard to get above the waterline in terms of getting people to care about your content. Right. And so I don't know which way.
Do you imagine it's simultaneous? I mean, this would have to happen with a very large person, like a Harry Potter or the next George Lucas, Star Wars, whatever, or 1 or 7.
A smaller film, but a great example. Its current is Man on Wire, which is in the theaters very recently, and came out on DVD and streaming at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Cuban, runs that, and of course he's willing to try new things and shake things up.
Right.
And what it's done, at least from a Netflix perspective, is actually our DVD side's getting more traction, and there seems to be a positive interplay. There's clearly some substitute of interplay, but there's also a positive one, which is, I want to see the whole thing, I want to see it on the big screen, then they get it on DVD. So it's a nice reinforcement.
But could you see something, you being part of I'm using George Lucas as an example because there's a very popular film. I'm going to pick 10,000 theaters that are the best screens in the world, kind of thing. I'm going to put it on everybody's going to get it on Netflix the same. It's going to drop at the same time. People can buy it on Amazon immediately in a DVD.
Mark Cuban's company, 2929's, tried a couple of those, and the theater shut them out. So the theater chains are very scared of that eventuality.
It has to be a big film that succeeds, I would think.
Well, that's a battle of wills, and right now the theater owners collectively are exercising enough power to prevent that from happening.